Alrighty, a very good Wednesday afternoon. Welcome in, Chico Borman Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. Great to have you along as we have reached the final week of the regular season. Your Cleveland Browns, it doesn't really mean anything, this game. Just keep them all healthy. Now, will it be most likely will be Jacksonville. If Jacksonville loses, then it gets interesting, and then it could be the winner of Tennessee and Indianapolis, I believe. But it's the Browns are in. That's all we need to know. Who's playing on Sunday? Well, that's probably to be determined. Kevin Stefanski is going to be addressing the media. Joe Flacco talked earlier to the media. Jeff Driscoll, the newly added quarterback, is going to be talking to the media today as well as the Browns get ready for Cincinnati. Who will play? Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore. I don't know. I am for, I definitely think the idea of having momentum and then resting guys. But with the case of Cooper, with the case of Elijah Moore, and I don't know what the status of Elijah Moore is. I mean, that was a very scary injury that he sustained on that Thursday night against the Jets. He went basically a face plant right into the turf, courtesy of C.J. Mosley. Amari Cooper, if it would have been a Sunday game, probably plays. But I said at the time, I'll say it again, I think this could be a blessing in disguise for some guys, a lot of guys. Instead of, the Sunday game, now you get the extra the extra days leading into the Cincinnati game. You could also get rest there. Maybe, if Flacco plays a quarter, they want Amari Cooper out there. I don't know. We'll wait and see. But I think Kevin Stefanski is going to make the right decision there. I did see Mary Kay Cabot put out Joe Flacco definitely hasn't lost his sense of humor on all this. So Flacco was talking to the media earlier today, and apparently he said that if he had messed up in high school, he could be some of these guys' dads. He is going to be 39 years old. Yes, he could. But damn it, he is the cool dad if I've ever seen one, if we've ever seen one. So more on Joe Flacco, more on the status of some of these players is going to come out today and certainly into tomorrow and Friday. But at this point, for me, maybe Flacco. If you've got Flacco there, do you put Bitonio and Wyatt Teller out there for a little bit? Bitonio's had the back issue. So I think that Stefanski will make the right call. Miles Simmons is going to join me from Pro Football Talk coming up at 1:30. He made a proposal, and I like this idea. They should do kind of like Major League Baseball, where in Major League Baseball you have September call-ups and they expand the rosters. They should do that for Week 18, where the practice squad is unlimited. Because you get to this point, you get to Week 18, some teams have clinched, and the Browns are absolutely just decimated by injury. What are you going to do? I mean, you've got to field a team. That's the thing. We can sit here and say, oh, you got to rest them. Well, you've got to have players available. I mean, you can't just throw out there guys from the stands and go, hey, go to it. And yeah, there is something to wanting to keep a little bit of momentum and wanting to keep a little bit of, a steady practice and game week and all that sort of thing. But I kind of like that idea, especially after, just things that we've seen. The whole San Francisco debacle last year where they didn't have a quarterback and they tried to rectify that. This is now something that I think if you're going to start expanding the schedule, you already have, and I don't think they're done. We all know that. By the way, speaking of expanding the schedule, and that's one of Rodgers' favorites, is that player safety is his number one priority. I don't know if anybody saw, but Roger Goodell Boy, he really dropped the hammer on David Tepper, didn't he? Holy mackerel. $300,000 for a guy worth $20 billion. Mike Florio, I believe, tweeted out that is the equivalent of if somebody was worth $1 million, I think probably Warden McAllister is probably a millionaire. So let's say Dave's got $1 million. That would be the equivalent of him being fined $14.50. Do you really think David Tepper got that message now? Do you really? I mean, these are your paying customers. Granted, it was on the road. I don't care. Like, if we have to explain, or there is no explanation for it. And if it was a player, God forbid, if it was a player, ladies and gentlemen, he wouldn't see the field for probably, it would be a handful of games, maybe even more. So why not the same for the owner? And save it, because I know it. Well, Chico, I don't know if you realize this or not, but the owners are actually Roger Goodell's boss. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I know that. But it still stinks. Then they're also like trying to explain this whole Dallas-Detroit debacle. It's crazy. I love when the league just, puts his foot in his mouth. And they have done that again. But we will talk to Miles Simmons coming up from Pro Football Talk at 1:30. And just about 10 minutes or so, 5 minutes or so, actually, Eric Edholm from NFL.com and NFL Network as we get ready for, obviously, the playoff season. Also, his final power rankings for Week 18. I saw 2 yesterday. So the Athletic had the Browns at 3 behind Baltimore and San Francisco. Shook and I were talking a little bit about this yesterday. The Athletic had them. Stephen A. Smith also had them. Now, I know people say, wow, but, it's the Browns seem to be the trendy pick with everybody kind of falling and struggling. And, you're the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, all these teams now that we expected to be much better than they are. And to finally, revert back to who we thought they were a year ago, say Kansas City, say Philadelphia, are not doing that. So you have some folks out there that have put the Browns as high as 3. Now, does it mean anything? No. It doesn't mean anything once the game is kicked off. These things usually draw the ire of fans in preseason. Like now, I think Edholm has the Browns at 7. He's got Baltimore 1, obviously, followed by the Niners, the Cowboys, the Dolphins, Detroit, Buffalo, and then Cleveland. I think in his write-up, he said, you could make a case moving them up a couple of spots, and I'd have no problem with it. He said, the fact of the matter is you've got one team that's beaten both Baltimore and both San Francisco, and it's the Browns. And he said right now they are definitely one of those teams. You always go into the playoffs, and there's one or two teams, usually just one, but one or two teams where you say, we don't want to face those guys. The Browns might very well be that team. They are still banged up, but it's kind of, it's like what Mike McDaniel said from the Dolphins, that this team, when you're playing for each other and you're playing for a bigger cause, something that we always roll our eyes at, but when you are to that point and you've accomplished what they've accomplished with that mindset, those teams are dangerous. They're galvanized beyond just the normal, hey, let's go out and win a football game. It's beyond that. All year long, guys like myself, all of us throughout the country, you see all these guys dropping like flies, from Nick Chubb to Deshaun Watson to Jack Conklin. It's just one after another, after another, after another. And you're like, oh, okay. It's been a fun run, but they can't possibly. The only ones that weren't listening, the only ones that didn't give a damn about the injuries were the guys in Berea and the guys in that locker room. And that's what McDaniel was saying. When that happens, and then you go out and you truly are playing for the guy next to you, and you are kind of, just turning a deaf ear to everything that's being said about your team, and you're just going out there and producing, and then wins are coming. it is magical. I mean, it's magical. And there are teams that we've seen this before where this happens. And, a team like Philadelphia with Nick Foles. By the way, that leads me to I got to get this rant off my chest. We touched on this a little bit yesterday. I want to do this. What time is it? All right, I got a few minutes before Edholm. Poor Edholm. Seems like every time he joins me, I'm just coming off a rant. And he's like, dude, everything all right? I'm not like upset about this. But I feel like with Joe Flacco, he's starting to get, like I mentioned, Nick Foles. I think there's like a fraction of the population out there that are putting Joe Flacco in like a Nick Foles, Case Keenum type category. Folks, I don't want to say read my lips. Somebody already did that before. Seriously, He's Joe Flacco. This guy was a Super Bowl MVP. He's a former first-round pick. Okay? He played, I know, it's Ray, we talked about it yesterday. It's Ray Lewis, and it's Ed Reed, and it's that defense, and I get that. But Joe Flacco in 2012, when he won the Super Bowl MVP, had a pretty nice playoff run. Oh, by the way, as I said, a first-round pick. Ozzie Newsome loved this guy. So, like, I heard somebody today, I don't even know where it was. It was one of the national shows. I had it on in the background while I was, while I was getting ready for my show. And somebody said, well, is Mason Rudolph going to be the next Joe Flacco? And I'm like, what? I mean, what? Come on, man. And this is not about Flacco elite or anything like that. But there really is, like, I think, a decent amount of folks out there who do believe that Joe Flacco falls in the category of like a Foles or a Keenum. And folks, you couldn't be more wrong. Like, this guy had a very good career. He doesn't have to be a Hall of Famer, but he had a very good career. Super Bowl MVP, first-round draft choice. When I heard somebody say today, well, is Mason Rudolph going to be the next Joe Flacco? What, are you kidding? Even if it was in jest. Come on. All right. As I said, poor Eric Edholm. Every time, seems like the last 3 times I bring him in, I'm coming off a rant, and he's just like, whoa, everything all right over there? Eric, how you doing?
I come in soft-footed. I want to make it a pleasant place to be. Whatever you need, I'm here for your support, man. I didn't mean to upset you, with my choice of sweaters. It was just whatever was laying around too, so I don't want to agitate things.
That's where I wanted to lead off with. Like, we both survived. We were texting, and it was so important, and it was so riveting that you took the dog for a walk, I think, for a while during the beginning of that game. But, like, I was watching that game, and at first I was like, well, maybe I'm overreacting, right? And I don't want to go straight to social media. I don't want to, my opinions aren't based on what people on social media. But I'm like, this is really, really boring, really, really bad. It was one of the worst football games, Eric, I've ever seen. You?
First 3 quarters didn't have a lot to offer, right? I mean, it was a fumble, like the big plays were like the fumble backed up and, the quarterback getting knocked out and this and that. I mean, I just sat there thinking, surely something is going to happen, right? These are 2 teams that have scored some points this year, even if you have questions about certain parts of their offense. And I heard some people saying, well, this is just sort of par for the course for ball games these days. And okay, other than Marvin Harrison and McCord, obviously, too, but Ennis Rakestraw and a couple other guys like who are hurt, Eichenberg, whoever. But I mean, 90% of their team was out there for both squads. So yeah, for them to I didn't feel like this was some phenomenal defensive battle early. I felt like it was more about the offensive lack of execution, but fourth quarter was all right. I'll take it. I rarely get a good fourth quarter from my team, so this is exciting.
Well, congratulations on the W. Yeah, I kind of felt like the Snow Bowl, even though I wasn't around for it, like Ohio State, Michigan back in 50, where it was like if you got a successful punt away in the blizzard and you were able to get the ball out of your hands without turning it over and flip the field somewhat as best you could, it was a success. Like, that's really what it felt like we were watching.
Yeah, I think I got my first taste of, prepare yourself for disappointment in for Missouri was when I applied to the school, got in, and then the next night I noticed they were playing on national TV in football. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'll watch them. I think, this may be where I end up going to school. And it was a 6-0 loss to Colorado. Now, Colorado was back in kind of their heyday back then, whatever, but I don't think Mizzou crossed midfield the entire game. And I thought, this shouldn't affect my decision of where I go to school, but it's not easy right now, and 30 years later, here I am, getting used to those type of games.
I got to say, though, the story of the game in terms of feel-good story was that running back for the Tigers.
Cody Schrader, yeah.
You'd have a better idea. You're the perfect guy to ask about his, what he could be in the NFL at the next level, but I don't even care because I don't want to take away. I mean, tell us a little bit about his story at Missouri and him busting onto the scene.
Yeah, quick backstory. Kid was in St. Louis, pretty good high school town. I mean, obviously St. Louis has gotten, OSU's gotten Ezekiel Elliott and some other players out of there, and Orlando Pace makes his home there now, and obviously, so there's some OSU ties there, whatever. But, put up good numbers, was one of the leading rushers, but played in a slightly lower conference and just got no attention whatsoever. He got an offer from Truman State, this tiny school about 90 miles north of Columbia. And they've produced one or two players over the years, but nobody you'd really know, and his first 2 years up there, he kills it. And some booster sees Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach, at a party or a social event or whatever, and says, look, I know you get a million of these, but do me a favor, take 5 minutes and watch this kid play. He's legit. I have ties to the program. They think they have the best, the FCS running back in the country. And they came in, he was like the 11th running back on the depth chart and just kind of kept moving his way up. And it really wasn't until the Georgia game last year that, he ripped off like a 60-yard run against Georgia in 2022. And everybody's like, whoa, okay. He's not a speed guy, though, really. He's just really quick, decisive, tough, smart. That's it. And I think in a zone scheme, he could be a top 3 back for an NFL team.
Yeah, he was, again, great story. And, of course, he came on really late in that game. Real quick before we get to your power rankings and the Browns and the postseason on the horizon, which we're all excited about here in Cleveland. Give it real quick. Obviously, as I said, you're right in the know as far as the draft buzz and as far as these prospects we're seeing for bowl games. Who is kind of like really burst on the scene, or I want to say shocked people, but really boosted their stock throughout the bowl season, the playoffs, whatever?
Yeah, it's tough, obviously, again, because we've talked about kind of the watered down, nature of the draft itself. I mean, obviously, when you get to play another game like Michigan and Washington are, this can't hurt Michael Penix's possibilities, right? I think Rome Odunze is, a top 10 pick all day long.
Agree.
And I have to be careful because I can't project underclassmen, but I can talk about the seniors, and both those guys are graduated, and until they officially declare, then I can blab away about them. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody knew about Rome. There were plenty of questions about Penix. I think, as you know, I mean, obviously from Big Ten country, he was a different style of quarterback back then. Ran a lot more, had some knee injuries, kind of remade his game from the feet on up, and has probably transformed himself more than, he and Bo Nix, I would say, are the quarterbacks who've come the farthest from what we remember early in their career. Not to say they didn't have talent. It was just this kind of chaotic mix of deep balls and scrambles. And then all of a sudden these guys are kind of refined, accurate, deadly pocket passers now who also can move a little bit. I mean, I think Bo's a better design runner and scrambler than Michael Penix is. But yeah, I'm excited to see him against, arguably one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in college football. I think Michigan obviously, did a lot to Alabama to kind of slow them down and frustrate them, at least certainly in the first half. But fascinating contrast to styles too. I mean, just, what you expect with the tough, hard-nosed, rugged run game of Michigan, and then kind of the flashy pass game of Washington. And and frankly, their lack of a complete defense is concerning. But Penix, as we know, when you average as many yards per attempt as he can flip a game quickly, man. So he's fascinating, and not everybody in the NFL loves him, but there are a lot of interested parties to see how he does.
Talking to Eric Edholm. He is with NFL Network and NFL.com. He's their lead draft writer and, of course, one of the best guys in the business to be talking football with. Been with me for a long time. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Okay, so I mentioned to start the show, like, I think it's more because a lot of these teams that we expected to finally get going, a la the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, are just kind of struggling, and they don't seem to be, gaining any traction anytime soon. So yesterday, I'm like, wow, that guy has the Browns 3. Wow, that guy has the Browns 3 behind San Francisco and Baltimore. Now, no. Yours is thought out, and I always like, first of all, whenever, because I hear this on like Browns Daily, and they, can you believe Edholm? It's like we've had this discussion before. It's really not something you're not putting like the Browns dartboard up and you're just pictures of Kevin Stefanski. You've got him 7. You've got Baltimore and San Francisco. But I noted in your write up for the Browns in there with that 7th spot that you could talk me into pretty much any of these spots, with obviously Cleveland being the team that beat both Baltimore and San Francisco.
Only one in the NFL to do it, right? I mean, you win at Baltimore. I mean, that's a feather in your cap. You beat the Niners. Needed a little luck to do it. Missed field goal at the end there, but still outplayed them for the majority of the game, right? I mean, held toe-to-toe with Lamar. I mean, they went up in big games and really showed their stuff. They've been able to survive this incredible rash of victories better than I ever imagined. Certainly the quarterback situation, I didn't bury him, but I thought, I don't know how they're going to do this. And all you have to do is look at a team like the Minnesota Vikings. Now, their defense isn't as dominant, but we've seen Brian Flores make good strides this year. They lose Kirk Cousins, maybe a little more solid footing than Deshaun or what they had before, but the drop off and you talk about dartboards. I mean, every week Kevin O'Connell has to sit there and say, who am I starting at quarterback this week? Is it matchup based? Like, really, they're taking the quarterback and saying, can this guy do better against this Sunday's opponent than this guy? With Joe, that has been, that possibility doesn't even exist. And now they're in a point where they can just say, go take care of business. We don't expect, 70% completions. We want Joe to be Joe, and we'll let the defense take care of the rest. And, it's good to see their run game emerge too. Obviously, I feel like they're one of the teams that is capable of winning it. Maybe it takes a little bit of a strange set of circumstances, but still, to me, the difference, as I wrote in a couple parts in the power rankings, from 3 to 9, you could probably jumble the order and throw it out there, and I would say that looks okay. That looks right. So it's very tiered. I mean, Baltimore's on its own level, and San Francisco might barely be in that same tier, and then it's a drop off, and then it's another drop off. You get to like the Rams and the NFC South.
So one of the things that made the rounds here in Cleveland and had a lot of people very very excited was Mike McDaniel's comments. You probably saw those or heard those, where he actually talked about the Browns, and he said, it's always amazing, in this game and at this level that you have all these injuries, and the only people that are paying attention to what's going on outside and the outside noise is the people outside, the guys in the building. They start to put together wins. It really does become next man up. You really do start playing for one another, and magical things happen. And all I could think of was, this is something that we've been hearing about that seemed like, light years away for a Browns franchise. Like no Browns team ever had that sort of culture. No Browns team ever had that. It was always bickering. It was always finger pointing. And honestly, when Mike made those comments, I think it just, who knows what's going to happen in this playoff run, Eric, but this is where I think Kevin Stefanski, not a homer call at all,
right,
has to be your coach of the year. I mean, my God, fourth quarterback, and yet you're at 11 wins heading into Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you just gave the sort of the capstone of his case right there. I mean, I think there are some pretty good candidates out there. I really do. Dan
Sure.
Campbell's got to be an obvious one. Maybe it carries over a little from last year too into this year. Fine. D'Amico Ryans, his first year in Houston, depending on what happens there, certainly deserves to belong. McDaniel has gotten some consideration. I don't know that actually happens now, but he's a popular guy, so there are going to be some people who vote for him. And trying to think who else. Shane Steichen has done a good job with the Colts. They could win Sunday and get in. I mean, so there are plenty of good candidates, but I'm with you. I think when people look back at the situation and realize they weren't even really on steady ground with Deshaun. I don't know that they could have felt that way when he had just pulled off. Correct me if I'm wrong. They just won at Baltimore, and then he was put on IR the next week, right? Yeah. It was like the first sort of ray of sunshine, and then he played a perfect second half, and then all of a sudden, oh, broken shoulder, he's done for the year. I mean, that is pulling the rug out from under a locker room, not just a coach. So to quickly pivot, figure out a plan at quarterback, give that quarterback autonomy. I mean, it's lucky the Jets didn't call him, obviously, but yeah, it's really been amazing. And, he entrusted Schwartz with the defense. That's worked out mostly amazing. And yeah, it adds up for me. I mean, it's not just a feel good story. It is a, look what he's done. Look at the hand he's been dealt, and look how he's played it.
The team above the Browns, you have the Bills at 6, and actually, this is where not many people give you the tip of the cap. So I will gladly do that.
I like it.
Buffalo, after that Week 15 win, as you wrote, a lot of people, Buffalo's back, and yeah, I mean, look, when Ken Dorsey left and let's run the ball a little more. Gee, what a concept. Let's take some of the pressure off Josh Allen and James Cook. But you said, well, it was impressive, and yeah, if they can get in, but I'm not ready to just graduate them to the top 3. Where do you see Buffalo and first, obviously, they have to win to get in.
Yeah.
What do you how do you see their prospects? Hypothetically, they do win. Are they as dangerous a team as you think many people think they are?
Yeah, it's crazy that there still is this wide range of outcomes, right? They can win the division, they can get in as a wild card, or they could miss the playoffs entirely based on them, and they'll know more by the time we get to Sunday night. But still, the point is right now, it's just desperation mode. So, and they've been that way since really losing at New England. Some of it has produced some incredible results. Obviously, the win against Dallas was probably, as dominant in the second half of the year as the Dolphins' win was in the first half. They've shown incredible prowess at their very best, but struggling against the Chargers, letting the Patriots kind of hang around and stay in the game, despite a 4-0 turnover rate, I want to say, differential. It's just a little bit concerning. I think that Josh has to sort of manage that, like playing freely, but also not putting my defense in a bad spot. And I don't know. I fully acknowledge that on their best day, they are going to scare the heck out of somebody if they get in, right? I mean, the first round game, whether they're coming to you or you're going to them, they're going to be a tough out, and you have to deal with a quarterback who can dice you up, and a defense that has had some really good performances lately. I guess I could probably say the same about the Browns. I mean, other than Flacco beats you in a different way, but there's not a whole lot separating those two teams right now, as far as I see it, as long as Amari Cooper's healthy and as long as they keep everything they currently have in place. So yeah, I give the Bills a shot. I was surprised how reactionary, and I try not to look at other people's power rankings until after I finish mine. I don't want to be biased, but as soon as I published that after the Bills' big win against Dallas, everybody zoomed them up to number 3. And I thought, are you sure? Are you sure? Your eye test has told you for the last X number of weeks they've looked like this? Okay. So I held them back a little and got ripped for it. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I've been hedging a little bit, I guess.
One thing that you did mention with Flacco, and it's kind of come with all the greatness and all the great plays and the touchdowns and the magic that has been Joe Flacco is he's thrown some interceptions. Now,
Yeah.
I think many would say, myself included, that's kind of who he is. I don't think it's him trying to. It's just, but in the playoffs, like everything else, it's magnified. So that's one area as far as Flacco that you want to be a little bit more careful once the playoffs begin.
Yeah, those picks really haven't hurt him. I guess maybe the Bears game, kind of put him a little behind. But I mean, for the most part, those interceptions he's thrown have not been a huge detriment. So that's a good thing. It's worked out really well. And the team has obviously put itself in a good position to survive a turnover or two. But they have to either keep playing that way or, just be a little more cautious. There were some shaky moments in that first half Thursday night. I mean, he had some, obviously some beautiful throws and great drives, and it was very encouraging. But not just the pick six, but a couple more plays where he got away with one, let's say. So though, if you could just minimize those, boil it down to as few plays as possible where, he's having to throw those tight window throws or make those, kind of cross your fingers and pray plays. But again, I don't want to downplay what he's done because it's been absolutely amazing. And I would pay serious money to see him go back to Baltimore in the playoffs and just run that thing back and see what happens. It would be, I think, one of the most anticipated, divisional round games that we've seen, if it happens, right? Along with Stafford and Goff could also rematch. I mean, that would, those two would be really fun and mean more than obviously just the playoff result.
A few more minutes with Eric Edholm, NFL.com lead draft writer, and of course talking about his power rankings as well as we near the end of the regular season. A couple more things, Eric. You have right behind the Browns, KC and Philly, I think in that order. Of the two obviously representatives in the Super Bowl last year, of the two, who could you see? Who would you be least surprised if they did go on a run and got back there?
Probably, that's a good question. It's on the one hand, you say maybe there's an easier road in the NFC. Like, for instance, Philly could open up as things stand right now. Let's assume Dallas takes care of business in week 17. Philly blew the division. They're now having to go on the road to either Tampa, New Orleans, Atlanta. I'm not saying they're going to win that game, but it wouldn't be a stretch to say they could win a game like that, right? So that right there kind of gives them a leg up, if you will. What if, I don't want to say that the Chiefs can't go on the road and win a game. I'm just trying to look at the conference standings right now. So let's say Kansas City beats, they got to play maybe Buffalo first. If Buffalo gets in as the 6th seed.
Could be, yeah.
That's a tough matchup. Colts maybe less so. Cleveland could be another possibility, although they look kind of dialed in. They're in the 5, so they're going to play the AFC South probably, right? So, yeah, it just feels like Philly has the easier road, but they're the team that I probably trust less right now. Their run defense has escaped them. The offense is scattershot. They've let some really good backs kind of tear them up. They're 1-4 in December, 1-2 at home in December. And the one win was kind of a hang on to your tail against the Giants rather. So their last good performance was beating Buffalo in overtime, and everything since then has been, shocking in some respects. So, they weren't great in December. They did kind of limp to the finish line a little bit last year, but they were winning games and it wasn't as glaring. So I think the Chiefs are the better team, but I think the Eagles have the easier road. I know that's a little bit of a cop-out.
No, I think it's spot on. The Eagles defense, Chiefs offense right now are the two big question marks. I think it's which one do you believe in the most? We'll get you out of here with this, buddy. I appreciate your time as always.
Sure.
So you're in Chicago. Boy, the narrative has changed quite a bit about Justin Fields, and everybody has. This is a fascinating topic. Everybody has an opinion on it. Like, do you believe in Justin Fields? I think it's as easy as this. If the Bears really do believe in Justin Fields, then just extend him. And it's not an Ohio State homer call. It's just, it's too important a position. I'm not going to gamble on, even if you like Caleb Williams or Drake May, which I'll ask you about in a moment. Yeah. If you like your quarterback, then extend him. But where do you think this thing is going? Like, where's the groundswell of support right now in Chicago as far as the Bears and Justin Fields?
I think it's firmly behind Fields, which honestly shocks me a little bit. I mean, I don't mean to. It's not like he hasn't played well since coming back from the wrist injury or whatever, but there's still been some fourth quarter execution stuff where you go, okay, the defense has played outstanding football, like shockingly good football since week 10, 11, 12, whatever, somewhere in that range is when they started, they get Montez Sweat and they've gotten their secondaries in good shape and, linebackers are playing well. Everything's working for them. So, he's got a good environment right now, and they've won games. They started 0-4. They're in a good spot right now at what? Where they're 7-9. So yeah, I mean they're almost flirting with a winning season here after it looks so bad so early. But yeah, it's been firmly supportive in from the players to the fans shouting, "We want Justin." This was after they got the number one pick. Carolina loses. They get the number one pick. About 40 minutes later, everyone's got smartphones. They've heard it in the stadium. They're chanting, "We want Justin." I think the quote unquote smart move is to trade him. But like you said, especially for Bears fans who have had a very complicated relationship with their quarterbacks over the years.
That's one way of putting it. Kind of like us here in Cleveland.
Yeah. Like, why do you guys love Joe Flacco? Because this thing is working and you believe in him. And it's been hard after this weird Deshaun thing and after the way Baker's thing ended and everything else before that. And it's the same with the Bears, just maybe to a little lesser extent. They haven't had somebody since like Jim McMahon that they could wrap their arms around and embrace and love and say, "This is our guy. We'll go to bat for this dude." Obviously you can get a lot for those picks. It's going to be interesting. You can also maybe get your own franchise quarterback on a cheaper deal. And it's if you look at it economically, that's the smart way to do it. But if you believe in him, I think you have to keep him.
But then if you do grab, let's say it is Caleb Williams, hypothetically. So you take Caleb Williams. I mean, right now he's on that rookie contract. But, like, if he starts hitting, those bonuses and he's a first-round pick and then he gets – so, I mean, by the time he were to get to a certain point, wouldn't he be – I mean, the money that they would be paying him would be eclipsing, I'm sure, even though they're talking about Fields maybe 40, 45 million in that area. I know it's as easy as saying you get a guy on a rookie contract, and yes, that's the formula. But is it just as simple as that? Because
no,
that's what. If you could talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. That's the hard thing for Ryan Poles. Assuming, I mean, we haven't heard about, colleagues have said that Matt Eberflus is probably safe. They've been a little bit silent on Poles, so we don't know. Even though this trade looks so brilliant now, there have been, and Sweat's been playing great and everything else. I mean, they're, obviously the Chase Claypool move and, other signings and non-signings. They missed out on Jalen Carter by choice. I mean, there are other things that haven't gone according to plan, but assuming he's back, I mean, this is the dilemma he faces. He decides, do I start over and potentially risk alienating a locker room that has shown pretty unwavering support for Fields? Like, you can go up and down. I haven't been there this year, but reading the local writers, they to a man, they say like everybody's got Justin's back when he's hurt, when he's not playing great, when he's when we're losing, they're supporting him as best they can because they love the guy and they want him to be their quarterback. So imagine being the GM who says, "Yes, that quarterback you love, we've just shipped him to Atlanta. We got a second-round pick. Hey, not bad. We got a third-rounder next year." It's gonna be a very tough sell, not only on the fans, but also the guys who are going to bat for you. And last time I checked, that matters. So that's why I keep using the air quotes with smart, because it's like, the book says to do it this way, but maybe the heart is saying something different. And I would understand if they had to go that route. They felt the need that to keep him, pay the money, miss out on some other free agents, and use these picks to accumulate some help for Fields.
So I know I have to tread lightly here. So if you have to speak in code or blink once or twice, as far as Caleb Williams, Drake May, and if you can't say anything, that's fine too. I know you're limited in what you can do. But if I were to say, is there one of those two guys, or maybe even both of them? Do they wow you like generational talent type?
I don't know if I'm quite on that, like sort of Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence level. And obviously Lawrence is great, when he wasn't always playing to that level. But as far as how they were viewed coming into the league, and they at least backed it up in some way, I think those are two that come to mind quickly in the last 10, 15 years or whatever. But I wouldn't put him on that level, especially after Caleb, I felt like, played it a certain way that he felt he had to play this year, which is kind of hero ball a little bit more, because he knew his defense was giving up 7 more points than he was going to score, right? I mean, it just felt like every single week they got in shootouts and he would have to throw some of those balls up for grabs. And so it did hurt. And I think May played some of the same way too. He also lost his offensive coordinator and some decent weapons, and didn't get his best receiver until about the 5th, 6th game of the year or whatever. So, both guys, I wouldn't say played their absolute best this past season, but Jaden Daniels did. And I think there's a chance he's in that same conversation with those two guys of who do you like most? And I don't know that he'll overtake them in the hierarchy of things and go ahead of those guys, but one of them, maybe, he could. There's a slim build. He's a little bit older, later breakout, that sort of thing. But man, if you watched him play this year, you saw an electric playmaker with incredible confidence. And it just, from like the Ole Miss game on, he was just lights out, and at times carried I think an overrated football team on his back. So if we're going to count May and Williams down a little bit for what they did last year, I think we absolutely have to recognize that Daniels might be in that same conversation, not for every team, but for some of the teams that are picking in that range.
One of the best in the business. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_@home with NFL.com. He is their lead draft writer. I kind of thought maybe you'd come with a Corby Jones jersey today.
Oh gosh, if I had one, yeah. I used to run into that guy. Apparently he's a really successful lawyer in Kansas City now. He was a Columbia kid growing up, but I used to run into that dude in St. Louis all the time at like
so did Andy Katzenmoyer.
Oh no. Oh yeah. No. Hey, I was there that day. The Katzenmoyer hit. I said it on Twitter the other day. I have never heard the air come out of a building like it. I think we were winning like 14-10 or as close, and boom, and just I saw Corby after the game. He had Katzenmoyer's helmet imprinted on his hand. Another thing I've never seen since that I was like, oh.
Well, the one thing, and we'll end with this, but the one thing that was interesting about that is, first of all, I was watching it on television, and
yeah,
Brent Musburger had just said, "Oh, the big cat, folks, he loved the big cat. Oh, the big cat, yeah. Look at the big cat." He's like, the big cat's been a little quiet today, and then the very next play was that. But I remember players, I think it was Jerry Rudzinski, who I used to have on the show a lot when I was in Erie. And Rudzinski said, he's like, dude, I'm glad that guy was okay. I just happened to glance over there as we were celebrating with Katzenmoyer.
Yeah.
And he had snot bubbles coming out of his nose, and his chin strap was up near his eyes. He's like, it was, there are hits. He goes, Chico, I'm a linebacker, for God's sake. I've seen a lot of hits. That one was just amazing.
It really was. The timing. It was the placement. It was right at the first down line. I mean, it was a long scramble. I mean, just I'll never forget it.
The big cat. All right, Eric, we appreciate the time as always, buddy. Enjoy the all the best in the new year. I'm sure the Twins are hopefully still enjoying what Santa brought them for Christmas.
Yeah, they've used at least 2 of their 130 gifts they've gotten so far. So they're doing all right. They're making their way up the list slowly,
Exactly how it should be. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate the time as always.
Have a good day, dude.
All right. That's Eric at home again, NFL.com. Also, you can catch him with the NFL Network. Oh, boy. Corby Jones. Good. That's good to hear. Very successful lawyer. He was a good player. I mean, he was a scrambler. Matter of fact, in that game, it was, I mean, they had just set it up. I swear to God, you'd think that it was on tape delay and they knew what was coming because they were both. I think it was Musburger and Dick Vermeil, and maybe not for me. I can't remember who the color guy was. And So he said something about the big cat being quiet, and then whoever was with him made a comment about, yeah, he's kind of been running freely and taking advantage of some room to run there in Ohio State. And then, I mean, the next play, not the second play, the next play, Katzenmoyer just put his helmet on that 7 and just blew him up. Unbelievable. And he had the visor on, the dark visor, so he just looked like he looked like a Terminator. And was on that day. All right, we'll take a break. We come back. One thing that I've also got to challenge a little bit here, happened overnight. It's not getting a whole lot of talk. It's in the world of hoops, in the world of basketball, and women's basketball. But I have to touch on this. We're going to get to that. We've got some updates on the Browns again as we get ready for Sunday, and a very interesting question. One of the, as we term them, great problems for them to have, which somebody on Twitter, who I respect a great deal, threw it out there about extensions and can you sign everybody. We'll talk about that as we roll along, and Miles Simmons will join us too with Pro Football Talk. It's the Chico Borman Show. More to come on this Wednesday right here on the Big Play Sports Network. Alrighty, welcome back as we roll through it on this Wednesday, winding down hour one. Coming up in the second hour, 1:30 to be exact, Miles Simmons does a great job with Pro Football Talk. And yes, way back when, Northeast Ohio native, but way back when, an intern at a station that I was at, and he was, he has really climbed. See the likes of like him and my buddy Shooky, and I might just get a little misty-eyed. What can I tell you? He's doing great work, though. And Florio had a brilliant take on David Tepper, which we'll get to, the owner of the Carolina Panthers. So Miles coming up at 1:30. Jack Duffin, I don't know if people are familiar with this guy on Twitter. He is a writer with the OBR, the Orange and Brown Report, and basically, like, he's one of those guys, if you have, he's a great follow on Twitter, and I'm not just saying that because Nathan Zagura gave him the plug, but he is. And if you're like wondering, okay, how much are they over the cap and how much does this guy count against the cap next year, Duffin is your guy. So follow him on Twitter at Jack Duffin. Zagura's right. He's always on top of this stuff. So he put this out, and again, goes under the category, and this is a good thing, a good problem. You have guys that you've drafted in Greg Newsome, in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, in Martin Emerson Jr., okay? And unlike those banner years, those really lean years where it was like second contract was a foreign language to us. And not to belabor the point, but I mean, it never worked out. Regimes just couldn't figure it out, whether they had one in the first round, two in the first round, they seemingly everybody was a bust for the most part. So now all of a sudden, no coincidence here. You've drafted well. You've produced guys. You've given guys, some of these guys already have second contracts, and now you have other guys waiting for a second contract. So let's go with these three. Greg Newsome, and his fifth-year option is coming up. Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson Jr., and we're going to throw in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Now, I think with JOK, what's interesting with him is he's one of those hybrid guys, right? Like, he can rush the pass. He can do so many things. He can rush the passer. He can drop in coverage. I mean, he can do it all. And with those guys, sometimes then they get labeled, not so much like, it usually happens with like franchise tag. Like a lot of times you'll see this with tight ends that perform like wide receivers, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. I want the wide receiver label if I'm going to get tagged because they can get more money, and I don't blame them one bit. JOK is basically one of those hybrid guys, and that's why he's so great, and we were all ecstatic when they got him. Now that he's in the right system under Jim Schwartz, he's flourishing because he's just ridiculously talented. If you had to pick two, though, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson Jr., or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, or as Mark Sanchez refers to him, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Mark, there's no R at the end of that. It's just M-O-A-H. Man, I mean, that you look at the defensive backfield and you say there's a lot of guys, they've done well. There's also, like, I don't want to pretend like, oh, well, hey, this guy's expendable, because as we know in this league, and this is never going to change, you can never have, it's like in baseball, you can never have too many pitchers, right? You can never have too many offensive linemen. Yeah, I know that. You can never have too many passers. Well, you can never have too many, you're in nickel and dime situations pretty much every down anyway. That's just how the offenses go in the NFL. So Greg Newsome has flourished as a slot corner. Martin Emerson on the outside, has really come on this year as well. And then you got JOK. Now, basically, let me bring up this stat because Duffin, as I said, is all over this. So he said that if they were to pick up Newsome's fifth-year option and sign Emerson to a $15 million a year deal, here would be the DB spending. It would be, hang on, that's not right. 30. Wait a minute. No, that's not right. Oh, there we go. 22 would be 41 million. So it'd be 41 million, 37 million previous. 21 million they spent on DBs in 2020. So you're talking about a $20 million increase from 2020 to 2022. Yes, Bohm. What do you yeah, I know I couldn't.
I need that to be memed, Chico. You just like looking at your screen like, "Oh, that's not right."
Yeah, I thought I was looking ahead for like 23, 24. It's kind of like you doing fair or foul. So like, wait a minute. I wasn't going to say that. What? I was going to ask you a question. Oh, I did it again. No, I am. So in other words, it's gone up 20 million in 2 years. 2 years. Another figure, 20, 30 million in another 2 years. Like, you gotta have those guys back there, but at what point do you say, all right, we've got to make it? And they're gonna have to make decisions like this. Like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Martin Emerson Jr., Greg Newsome, pick 2 of the 3. What would you do? You had to pick 2. Who would it be?
Right now, Chico, I'm thinking, okay, definitely keeping JOK. I think
I agree.
As
I
long
think
as,
most people would agree with that.
As long as he's in that linebacker room, I feel good about where they're at. Now, the DB one is a lot dicier. I'm honestly leaning Emerson. I think ultimately you could get him at a cheaper price, and you've seen him consistently get it done from the slot and on the outside. And I think at the end of the day, he gives that versatility is the edge that I would give him over Newsome. It's really tough though.
It is.
I want all of them.
It is tough, and I love Greg Newsome, but I agree with you. And the reason that I would go with Martin Emerson is, first of all, oftentimes you say with a guy playing on the outside, you can now the slot corner is very important too, and he has been outstanding in that role. Newsome has. The thing with Newsome though versus Emerson is very physical. Like, one of the reasons Andrew Berry loved him, sometimes he can be too physical, which is when he gets flagged and, PI and all that. But I just feel like, I'm not saying that you can find a Greg Newsome. I don't want to have it be interpreted that way. But I think when you find a long physical corner who can also keep up with some of the best talent and opposites, I just don't know if – I think it's easier to find a Greg Newsome than it is a Martin Emerson Jr. I'm not even going with the money. I don't even know. Hypothetically, I think he used, $15 million for Emerson. That sounds about right. Again, JOK, I don't know, because he's that hybrid guy and he can – do it all. What is his age? I have no idea. But if you had to pick 2 of those 3, I feel like dirty saying this. Like, I feel like somebody's going to be mad at me other than just Greg Newsome. But if you had to take gun to the head, and by the way, these are decisions the Browns, we say it's hypothetical, but these are the decisions that they're going to have to make. You can't pay everybody. And, let's drop the bombshell again. You can't pay everybody with what you're going to be paying Deshaun Watson. Like, the dude is eating up an enormous amount of cap room. There's no getting around that. It's gargantuan. Now, we're not going to get into, for these purposes, well, should they have done it? I don't even want to talk about it. We'll deal with that after this season. Enjoy Joe Flacco. Enjoy the run they're on. But looking ahead, Deshaun Watson is due a lot of money. He ain't going anywhere. These are decisions they're going to have to make. I think I'd probably go JOK and Emerson, though, too. And I have a feeling, looking at some of the comments, that's where many people seem to be going. Now, Barry has until May, whenever it is, to decide on the option. It's interesting, and I hadn't really given it much thought. This is why Jack is good at what he does and covering the cap and all of these questions, but hadn't given it much thought. I don't necessarily want to right about now, but when I saw this posed, like, again, Let's remember this. Instead of fretting about it, instead of arguing about, no, I can't believe you would pick Martin Emerson Jr. over great. Instead of that, just, again, remember, these are great problems to have. Problems that we never, ever could have in the past. If you got a guy to his second contract, it was, oh my gosh. Now you've got guys right and left. You've got talent. But I think I'd probably go with these two. Talk to me tomorrow. I might just change my mind. I don't know. All right, we'll take a break. We come back. We're going to play a little fair or foul. Also, I want to get to this this college basketball story in women's hoops, and Miles Simmons coming your way. Pro Football Talk at 1:30. It's the Chico Borman Show. More to come. Second hour on the way right here on the Big Play Sports Network. Oh, the off-air conversations. We love them. Welcome back, Chico Borman Show on this Wednesday. Good to have you along. Miles Simmons, Pro Football Talk, Northeast Ohio native, coming your way at the bottom of the hour. I know he's excited. We're all excited about the Browns in the postseason. He's got a couple proposals, one proposal in particular that I totally agree with. Now that we've expanded, expanded practice squads to some degree, but now expanding the season, probably will continue to do that. Maybe a little something extra for Week 18. We'll touch on that and much, much more with Miles, top of the hour, or bottom of the hour. But right now, it's time for another bombastic edition of Fair or Foul here on the Chico Borman Show. Hello, Bohm.
Here we go. All right.
You got this.
Chico, I want to ask you firstly. We over the weekend, a little bit of controversy happened that we didn't talk about.
What's that?
Russell Wilson and Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Basically, so the Broncos did win this past Sunday, but they benched Russell Wilson and started Jarrett Stidham. Now, Sean Payton tacked it up to strictly being the team needing a spark, more or less, for lack of a better term. Fair or foul, Chico? Because it did come out, and Russell Wilson, I think, has handled it very professionally. But he did reveal, as was reported, that they basically sat him down in the middle of the season, like before the bye week, and tried to get him to renegotiate his contract and the injury clause during the bye week.
Yep.
Fair or foul, this Broncos handling of this whole Russell Wilson situation?
Okay, so the decision itself is okay. Like I don't really see Russell Wilson, like he's not their guy, and they're okay. But the idea, what he's ticked off about, and matter of fact, was so upset about it, I think he and his agent went to the Players Association. Like they went to him during the bye week, and was trying to get all this. I don't want to say dirty pool. It's just you don't do that. I don't think you do that to the 53rd guy on the roster, let alone the quarterback you brought in. Now, again, I agree with the assessment, and I think even though Sean Payton says that, and we know he has to say that, we all know that that's BS. I kind of agree with Russ that, the whole bye week thing was kind of Bush League, but they're not going anywhere. He's not their guy. So
I agree he's not the guy, but I do think, to your point, the handling of it seemed a little bit messed up, and he had every right to go to the Players Association for that fast one that the Broncos organization tried to pull on him.
I kind of like how he just kind of was like, real calmly. He's like, I just didn't really appreciate them, during the bye week coming up with just very, very candidly, just open about it.
Hopefully Russ lands somewhere where they will let him cook. Now, I've seen some speculation.
Not producer of the year for no reason, kids.
Broncos country. Let's ride. I have seen some speculation of teams, as far as teams linked to him, of the Steelers being one, which I think is interesting, and I'm not saying I see that happen, nor am I saying that that's a fair or foul topic. I just thought I would bring it up because I did want to talk about the Steelers right now on this Hump Day edition of Fair or Foul, Chico.
All right.
So
very well set up, Boom.
Thank you. Yeah, that felt like a relatively smooth transition as far as, okay. But anyway, so Kenny Pickett. That's how you botch a good transition, damn it. So it was reported that Kenny Pickett refused to dress as the backup in last week's game against Mason Rudolph. Now,
no, not against
Mason
Rudolph.
for Mason Rudolph.
He may as well have been against Mason Rudolph.
Right now, I'm like one of those wide receivers where it's like I'm about to catch the pass, and then I start to look upfield, and then the pass just, That's me right now.
Looking into your hands, Boom.
Yeah, that's right. You got to focus, see it through. Fair or foul, you think that Kenny Pickett, this might change the Steelers' stance on Kenny Pickett long term?
I don't know. Like, I think there's got to be something to this story, or I don't think it comes out like this. And I think that there would be a huge, statement from the organization. And so, Pickett now is basically trying to do damage control. Here's what I think is interesting. Mike Tomlin's had this kid's back from day one. He wasn't, I don't want to say he wasn't, he was a popular pick, I guess. He played at Pitt, but this is my guy. And remember all the feel-good. It feels like 5 years ago. All the feel-good stuff in preseason. Are they even going to let a ball hit the ground at in Latrobe? My God. The ball just, it's amazing. There is so much up in the air with these guys right now. Like, I don't think Tomlin's going anywhere, nor do I think he should necessarily, but I also don't know exactly 100% what's going on behind the scenes. All I know is, it's one thing, and it's never good. It's one thing to have like George Pickens, crying about this or that. But when this is your quarterback, and if Kenny Pickett gave that ultimatum, like, any goodwill that you had with Mike Tomlin knowing Mike Tomlin as we know him just outside looking in, is gone. Like, you don't do that to Mike Tomlin, especially when he's had your back. If that's true, not a good look for Kenny Pickett. I don't think he's going anywhere, him or Pickett, but some of this, it can't be BS, because it doesn't get to this point if there's not some shred of truth to it.
Yeah, that was exactly my thought, Chico, that there's something happened. Something went down. And, as many times as we've talked about George Pickens complaining in the locker room and whatnot, he still suits up every day, and he still goes out there and plays. And so, obviously, Kenny Pickett forced to be benched. I understand that that's a tough bit of adversity for you, Kenny, but yeah, a little bit too far in my opinion. Now, Mason Rudolph, his resurgence has been fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, was that more about, okay, we're out of it, so Kenny, we don't want to, he was banged up when he went out, right? I mean, he was, if I remember right, he was
ankle.
So I mean, I don't know if that was communicated to him. I don't know, is he insecure with, nobody should be insecure about Mason Rudolph. If you're insecure about Mason Rudolph, then you probably should be out of the game entirely. I mean, yes, he has been a bit of a resurgent. I still can't believe that somebody talked about him in the same vein as Joe Flacco today. But, yeah, I don't know, man. To be determined in Pittsburgh, but the drama that unfolds there day after day, in addition to radio hosts calling in and berating Pony, which I'm all for, I absolutely love. I got to get Ken Carman.
Yeah.
Because Pony loves to shoot his mouth off. A little too much, to be honest with you. Calling out Greg Newsome? Dude, shut up. Shut up.
Steelers fans, am I right? So, Chico, I can't not ask you about this, because I've seen double-digit tweets on it of Browns fans clamoring for the team to go out and sign this player. Now, the New York Jets recently parted ways with Dalvin Cook, as he reportedly wants to sign with a contender. Fair or foul, you giving a flyer to Dalvin Cook for this Browns playoff run?
Okay, now, I'm normally the guy, right? Oh, Chico. I love this if they can get him. I mean, because Dalvin Cook to me is a lot like Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is in a world by himself as far as the angry runs, but Dalvin Cook is between the tackles. Dalvin Cook has fresh legs. Dalvin Cook can catch it out of the backfield. All right, truth be told, I've always been a big Dalvin Cook fan. His biggest issues in Minnesota, where at some point he was gonna have that shoulder injury. He was gonna have some injury that he would have to play through, and he wouldn't be healthy. I think Dalvin Cook still has something left in the tank. I absolutely, positively would love to see the Browns go out and get him and add some depth to that backfield and add some support for Joe Flacco on that offense. And yes, all of that. Yes. So I may have juked somebody there, but I don't know what the terms are, but I absolutely am looking into, and it's nothing against Jerome Ford. I think, he played his ass off against the Jets. That was one of the themes. I thought he absolutely ran. He ran angry. He ran like Kareem. But if you get an opportunity before the postseason, it's so fun to say that, by the way. If you get an opportunity before the postseason to add somebody like Dalvin Cook, and he's got some juice left in those legs, yeah, absolutely doing that.
And Chico, I did actually come across a quote from Dalvin Cook on Kevin Stefanski, talking about their time together. He said, quote, "Coach Kevin has had such a positive influence in my life since I came to Minnesota. He believed in me as a person and player and entrusted me with a featured role in our offense. Cleveland got a great one, and their entire organization will benefit from his leadership." So there you have it. Obviously, you would think Dalvin has his sentiments may not have altered.
I'm reading the tea leaves. Literally, Dalvin's a Brown. I don't know for sure, but they're talking about Dallas getting him. I've heard that. I mean, obviously it's gonna be a playoff team, but I think there could be legs here, and I like it.
Yeah, Dalvin is It's exciting, Chico. If they could bring them in, I think that's an exciting talent that you could throw into the fold in that running back room.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, NBC, Chico, I don't know how much of an Olympics fan you are, but interestingly, NBC has inked Snoop Dogg to a deal to be a boots on the ground reporter.
I am a Snoop Dogg fan.
So, fair or foul, that's what I wanted to ask you. Does this move the dial for you in terms of your Olympic watching? We've seen Snoop Dogg commentary in the past in other sporting events. It's not necessarily on topic, but it's always entertaining, Chico.
Okay, so I want to say this and look in this camera right here in front of me. And basically, I'm talking to the likes of, we all love a big part of what we do on this show and getting clips out has to do with Rob Watson playing hoops for BW and like the Padones of the world. And so when I'm saying this, I guarantee, and Rob, make sure you send this to Rob. I guarantee Rob is like, Chico, you don't like Snoop Dogg. Shut up. Like, I can see him. I've had that Rob eye roll before. I can see the eye roll. Rob, I love Snoop Dogg. Yes. When I was in college, hit the music. When I was in college, no, I'm just, as I've said, Thursday night was a huge going out night, and you would hear What's My Name blaring from every South Campus dorm bathroom, guys getting ready to go out on the town at Not Al's 2 and B-dubs, and it would be, you're listening to that, Gin and Juice. What's the other one that I can't really, it was very vulgar. And yes, it had the warning, but Snoop Dogg is entertaining to me. First of all, when he's appeared in like NFL event, he's going to be baked. That adds to it, right? I mean, I'm sorry. This is a family show. It's legal now anyway for people. Hey, that's what Snoop does. I would, if you're telling me that, hey, Snoop Dogg's on TV right now, he's doing an interview or he's giving an update on the Olympics, I'm tuned in. Absolutely. Believe it, Rob. Believe it.
That's a way better song for college time than mine, because I distinctly remember the songs blasting through the air, walking down the streets around the fraternity houses. It was not Snoop Dogg. It was much less enthralling for me.
Slim with the tilt-a grin. What's my bleeping name? Snoop Doggy Dog.
Bow wow wow yippee yo yippee yay.
Bow wow wow yippee yo.
That is fair or foul, Chico.
That is, actually, that was very foul to end it like that.
To end it on a high note.
Yes, but, we had to do that. All right, Miles Simmons coming up bottom of the hour. All right, so I got to get to this hoop story. I don't know if you saw this, Boom. The Grambling women's basketball program. I know you're a huge fan. You come in with a lot of Grambling women's basketball.
I thought you were going Caitlin Clark here when you mentioned women's college basketball.
We'll be getting to her. Well, you know what? Now that you brought it up, you're always sidetracking me. Does Caitlin Clark look like she could pass for Aaron Kraft's twin sister? When I see her interviewed, I'm like, she looks like Kraft. Now, I mean that in a good way, like a girl version of Kraft before anybody kills me. By the way, what she did last night against Michigan State, step back from the logo. She's crazy. But yeah, I always thought she looks like Aaron Kraft. But no, this is Grambling women's basketball. They played, I want to make sure I get this college right, so just bear with me here for a second. It seems like, I thought this was like a Bishop Sycamore type thing. This school can't be legit. The College of Biblical Studies played Grambling last night in women's hoops.
Oh, yeah, CBS.
Guess what the final score was, Boom?
186-7.
Close. 159-18. Now, I know in high school hoops, a lot of times high school women's hoops, and it's not a knock on, I just got done saying Caitlin Clark is must-see TV, But a lot of times you will see lopsided scores like this. But in college, for it to be that bad, 159 to 18. Here's my question. And I'm not knocking College of Biblical Studies. Like, shout out to Monsignor Antall. All right, I'm a proud Catholic. This is not about, I'm all about it. But like, College of Biblical Studies has a basketball. Like, think of all the schools out there where you're like, wow, really? You guys don't have a basketball program? Oh, you don't have a football program? But the College of Biblical Studies has a women's hoops team? And why is Grambling scheduling? I mean, they got to schedule somebody, but what do you get out of that? Are you slapping fives? Are you, I don't know. Grambling 159, College of Biblical Studies 18. Like, did they ever call off the dogs? Oh no, you're bringing it up. So full disclosure, I can see Bohm's computer screen from here. What is that? Their head coaches?
This is their athletic site, and from what I can tell, they only have 2 sports: women's and men's college basketball.
Are they D1? What are they?
That I'm looking for more details right now.
I see somebody palming a basketball. Is that Mary Magdalene?
Yeah, CBS Ambassadors basketball.
Wow.
Based out of Houston.
Mary Magdalene, top of the key. Over on the right wing to Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa down low to Sarah. Sarah, oh my God. I'm dumbfounded. When I first read this headline, I thought, come on, man. Transformation starts here. I'm looking at, so it is the Houston area. So I'm actually going to see my cousin tomorrow, or my nephew tomorrow, who's from Houston. I'm going to have to ask him how big, if he can get me some College of Biblical Studies garb. And again, I have nothing against religion. Monsignor, if you're watching, listening, whatever, that's right. But the College of Biblical Studies, does that sound legit? I mean, I know they are, but I mean, does that even sound like, did they play a full schedule? Give me their schedule, Bohm. Like, who else is on their schedule? Tell me they're not playing like Iowa. Tell me they're not playing. I mean, did they have a conference?
You want women's or men's schedule? I
want the women's, because that's what we're talking about here. Again, they lost. College of Biblical Studies lost 159 to 18 to Grambling.
They play Xavier. They played Xavier in November.
All right.
Ozark Christian College. Dallas Christian coming up. Arlington Baptist. Randall University. Champion Christian College.
Okay. So it's and I'm not.
Xavier's the big one.
Then you know what? Then why would Grambling schedule them? I mean, what? And again, I'm not saying this like I know every team. We talk about it in college football. We talk about it all across all of these play, right? It's an opportunity to make some, not make some money, but you're going to divvy out some money. But it's the feel good. It's homecoming. You want some patsies in there to be able to get some W's, and you can work on some other stuff. So I get it. But there's that, and then there's this. Like, this is the equivalent of, like, Ohio State scheduling Concordia Lutheran in Wisconsin or something. Like, what?
It's like a Harlem Globetrotters matchup where you just, like, beat up on the opponent, basically toy with them.
I don't, I'm not following that. I'm not following that. By the way, I mentioned Caitlin Clark. If you can get a side-by-side, she does look a little bit like Aaron Kraft. Like, Aaron Kraft, I think, does have a twin sister who did play on the women's hoops team at Ohio State. I don't know what Caitlin, I think his sister's name's Caitlin. But Caitlin Clark, don't really get an action shot, but if you just, like, I was watching her being interviewed this morning, and I'm like, wow, she really looks a lot like, am I right? Bohm. See, you agree, don't you?
I think you're not wrong.
She could pass for. I mean,
a case could be made.
You said, oh, you're Aaron Kraft's twin sister. Yeah, I mean, she's incredible, and that shot. You take a step back from the logo three. I don't know what else this girl can do. She's phenomenal, but I don't know. They need to let the College of Biblical Studies needs to borrow her for about a month. I mean, 18 points. Were they scored by one girl? Were they big off the bench? Like they got 13 off the bench. The starters only scored 5. And again, if you're Grambling, are you really celebrating that? You won. Come on, man. Like this isn't real. Boom, this can't be real.
Hey, I mean, gotta get that money from the bigger programs when you can.
Shame on Grambling. All right, we'll take a break. We come back. Miles Simmons, Pro Football Talk, get his thoughts on the Browns. Northeast Ohio native, he definitely loves them, and we'll get his thoughts too. We talked about this yesterday on the show with Nick Shook. Who would be your rookie of the year? Easy to say C.J. Stroud. It would probably be C.J. Stroud for me, but could you make a strong case? We'll see if Miles will for Puka Nacua. Guy's been pretty damn solid this year. We'll talk more about that. And Mike Florio getting one of those wide calculators. We'll explain when we come back. The Chico Borman Show, more to come right here on the Big Play Sports Network. All righty, welcome back as we roll through it on this Wednesday edition of the Chico Borman Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. And we were talking earlier about this. Joe Flacco addressed the media, jokingly said that if he had messed around in high school, he might be one of these guys' dads, one of his teammates' dads. He won't be starting. He's going to get rest as well. Jeff Driscoll will be the Browns' 5th starting quarterback this season. And with that, we bring in Miles Simmons with Pro Football Talk. Northeast Ohio native, just does great work with PFT. You can also catch him on the Peter King podcast as well. Miles, so great to hook up with you again. Jeff Driscoll, the 5th starting quarterback, and you and I are talking about the Browns getting ready for the postseason. Wow.
Yeah. I think it's fun, I mean, Jeff Driscoll is not a name that I had on my bingo card for starting for the Cleveland Browns this year, but neither was Joe Flacco, for that matter. So yeah, I mean, look, Kevin Stefanski said it today. They've earned the right to rest some guys, and I think he's right about that. And frankly, with the way that the injuries have gone, you almost have no choice but to rest guys. And the real problem with it, though, Chico, is that you can't just bring up everybody from the practice squad. Like, I feel like at a certain point, that's what they really should be able to do, where it's just like, man, like September call-ups in MLB. It's like, okay, it's week 18, it's in everybody's best interest if the best players don't play for teams that have already clinched. So, like, if you're San Francisco, if you're Baltimore, Cleveland, Kansas City, whatever it happens to be, it's like, let them empty out the practice squad and let all those guys play and let the important people rest so that we can all watch them in the games that we really want to watch, which are, in the wild card round and beyond. So, yeah, I mean, I guess if that's the way it's got to be, that's the way it's got to be. And I don't know what Jeff Driscoll's going to look like for the Browns on Sunday, but really, does it matter?
No.
No.
And I'm glad you brought that up about the practice squad, because I mentioned that. I saw that tweet earlier. And don't you think, I mean, look, they're not going to be done with 17 games. This is going to be extended to 18. Don't you think at some point that they might, I mean, it doesn't seem that far-fetched that they would do something like that, because I agree with you. I think that's the route they should take eventually.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's not very far-fetched to think that game day rosters could expand. The fact that the practice squad expanded to 16 over the last couple of years, that I think says something about the way it's sort of stemmed from COVID, right? And how teams were able to get guys in, make guys through, and, promote guys when they needed to, because you never really knew when somebody might pop up with a positive COVID test. So they realized that some of those roster mechanisms worked really, really well. So you kept some of them, like being able to have more veteran guys on your practice squads. And I think that that's worked out really well. I think that it's one of those things where the more we continue to see guys playing and the more teams experience, hey, we had this one thing that we thought worked pretty well. Why don't we expand on that more? And, it's not really going to cost owners much of anything. If you are going to do something like this, then that's where I think you could see some of those changes, especially as you mentioned. I mean, eventually we probably are going to see an 18-game season. I don't know when exactly that's going to be, but certainly it seems like it's something that's coming down the pipeline. If we went to 17, why not go to 18 and, make it more even? So, yeah, I could certainly anticipate there being more of these kinds of things happening.
Let me get back to Joe Flacco for a moment, because something that I've noticed over the last, say, week or so, certainly since, he's come on board and he's had success, but it's happened a lot over the last week or so, where I'm hearing folks say, you look at Nick Foles and you look at, Case Keenum, and you look at, and I'm like, wait a minute. Now, like, I understand what they're trying to say, but to look at Joe Flacco as a journeyman is doing him a disservice. Like, this is a guy that was a first-round pick, Super Bowl MVP, and while, yes, I mean, it's all about Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs, Joe Flacco was a big part of that. So I think it feels like there's a fraction of the population that just kind of views him as this journeyman guy, and that's not Joe Flacco.
No, it's not. I mean, you just mentioned his experience. I mean, his resume certainly eclipses that of Nick Foles and Case Keenum, who, share the distinction of being 2015 St. Louis Rams quarterbacks and about nothing else, right? And then you look at those two guys versus what Joe Flacco's done in his career, there really is no comparison. But I think what makes it that much more remarkable what Joe Flacco has done is that he wasn't with the team in training camp, right? It's not like this is somebody that, they signed in the offseason and thought, yes, we need a good veteran backup, and this is going to be our guy, and, we will ride with him if we have to, if something happens with Deshaun Watson. I mean, this is a guy they brought in off the street because Deshaun Watson got hurt. And then it was kind of like, well, maybe he'll play because we feel confident in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And then, of course, he gets the concussion in Denver, and then Flacco plays against the Rams, and it's all gravy from there. So it's interesting, when you want to make that comparison because it's the backup coming in and doing X, Y, and Z. But you're right. It's very different because of the type of experience that Joe Flacco has. And I think that experience is why he's been able to pilot the Browns as effectively as he has in these last few weeks.
Yeah, I was saying yesterday with my buddy Nick Shook, we were doing the show, and I said, those guys I just mentioned, I mean, we're talking about, and look, nerves is one thing, okay? I'm sure he has everybody has nerves, I'm sure. You get ready for a big game, playoff game. But, like, we're talking about a guy that lined up, and every day it was Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs and talking. Like, I don't see Joe Flacco, and I think we've seen this play out in his brief time here. Like, I don't see him getting rattled after all of those years with all of those guys.
Yeah, nothing will phase him, and there's nothing that you can really do as a defense that's going to fool him, right? He's had so much experience that he's seen everything. It's the same thing that we used to say about Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and those guys of that generation. There's only so much you can do to try and disguise things because, well, Joe Flacco's seen it. He's played against it. He's been at that high level for so long, and when you're in your late 30s, and you still have an arm that can do the things that Joe Flacco's arm can do as long as you're protecting him, that's great. And the other thing I think about it too, Chico, is that when Joe Flacco makes a mistake and when he's turned the ball over, and frankly, he's turned the ball over a little bit too much, but those things don't faze him either. He understands that you just got to come back in and play the next play. And that's something that you have to learn kind of through experience, and that doesn't just happen. So I think that all of those things combined is really what makes him the perfect guy right now for the Browns situation. And then it also makes them dangerous in the postseason as well.
Northeast Ohio native, and now with Pro Football Talk and the Peter King podcast, Miles Simmons joining us here on the Chico Borman Show on the Big Play Sports Network. So, as I said, Northeast Ohio native, you know what it's been like since they've come back in the league in 99. And something that made the rounds this past week, but really, really hit me was Mike McDaniel of the Dolphins when he was talking about the Browns in one of those pressers. And he was talking about, when all these injuries hit and, the guys rally around each other and they don't care about the outside noise and something magical happens. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I had to remind myself, like, he's talking about the Browns, right? Because that's culture. And I'm not trying to just belabor the subject, but I mean, my gosh, it's been at the heart of what's been wrong for so many years. And like, that's exactly what they have done this year when, quite frankly, all of us, myself included at times, said, forget it. They're not gonna be able to do it.
What's funny, Chico? For years I've said this about like the Steelers and the Ravens. Like they get program victories.
Yep.
Just games where, they seem to have absolutely no business winning, but then somehow they're able to pull it out in the end because they just have this belief in themselves and, their culture and everything that they need to do in order to win a game. And it doesn't matter what happens in the first three quarters as long as you get things done in the fourth. And the Browns have started to win those kinds of games this year, and that's what happens when you have an effective head coach and an effective general manager, and you've been able to implement a plan and, instill that culture over a number of years. And so now the Browns they have a program. And so that's something that's not just encouraging for this year, it's next year and beyond, because that Kevin Stefanski is going to be able to coach. Right? You understand that Barry is going to be able to put a good team together that makes sense based on the way that Kevin Stefanski wants to coach it. So the way that this team has played this year is so fun to watch. And, being from Northeast Ohio, as you mentioned, I mean, I watched a lot of bad football, right? And we watched a lot of teams that didn't have that kind of culture, but it just, you can feel it when you watch it, how everybody cares about each other and everybody wants to lift each other up on that team. And it's something special. And you want it to continue, and you want to see that ride last as long as possible.
And, we talk about this a lot of times with players that, well, hey, especially quarterbacks, but all players, like, man, are they going to, let's go already. You're learning, and it's tough at that level. And, sometimes it takes players a year, 2 years, whatever. I think we forget that for young coaches, I think when we say, well, he's the head coach of a particular team in the NFL, like, oh, he's a finished product. Kevin Stefanski this year, I think, has been the year that we know he's got a great offensive mind, but until you're dealt something like this, similar to COVID, but even more so now, you don't know until you're faced with it. And I think this is him taking that next step like a player would.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time around Sean McVay covering the Rams in 2017 and 2018 day to day. And, it's sort of the same thing, right? You come in, Sean McVay comes in and just completely changes the culture, and it becomes a winning football team basically immediately. But there were things that he had to grow into that were not just apparent over those first couple of years. And I mean, the other thing was he got hired at the age of 30, turned 31 in that January, right after he got hired, which is like, as somebody who's now 32, I'm like, I don't understand how in the world that happened and how in the world he was as successful as he was that early in his career. But nevertheless, it's the same sort of thing with Stefanski, right? I think one of the things that obviously has worked out very well was him hiring Jim Schwartz and turning the defense over to Jim Schwartz. And, people want to say that, oh, well, Jim Schwartz is doing this and he's doing that. And that's very true, but Stefanski is still the head coach. And so everything that happens with the Cleveland Browns on the field is ultimately his responsibility. So I think that that's one of the things where you say, all right, what is going to be and who is going to be, what's going to be the best scheme for our personnel and who is going to be the best personality and best coach for that. And bringing in Jim Schwartz was an absolute grand slam as a coaching hire. And so it's those kinds of things that, you have to learn and you have to deal with as a head coach. And it makes a significant difference. And frankly, I know that there are arguments for others, but I really don't know how anybody could possibly be coach of the year over Kevin Stefanski when you look at what the Browns have done with the injury situation that they've had, right? It's not just Deshaun Watson, it's Nick Chubb. I mean, not having that guy, for basically the entire season is unbelievable how well that offense has still performed.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Jim Schwartz on the defensive side, a guy like Bill Callahan on the offensive line, like who knows, just and I'm not saying that, hey, nobody else could do what Bill Callahan's done, but, there's a lot of on the fly, okay, this guy's out. He's got to do whatever he can. He's not going to be able to, just wave a magic wand, but at the same time, he's doing something right, so it's not a disaster. It might not be perfect, but they're averting disaster in large part because of those assistant coaches.
Absolutely. And you might not say it, but I've been covering this league for 10 years now. Like, there are maybe 2 to 3 offensive line coaches who people talk about around the league with the regard that they talk about Bill Callahan, right? So like that right there, I think tells you just how good of a hire that was initially when he brought him in, and the fact that Callahan has still been able to coach at a high level and get the Browns to be as cohesive as a unit as they've been, despite all of the injuries that they've suffered throughout the course of this season. It really is remarkable.
You can follow him on Twitter at Miles A. Simmons. He's with Pro Football Talk and the Peter King podcast, does great work. And you mentioned you're out west now on the West Coast and had some time, plenty of time covering the Rams, and obviously we got the Chargers out there too. I mean, if somebody said to you, we've used that phrase about 50 times this year about the Browns. If somebody would have said to you to start the season, one team, I don't know if I don't say, one team will fire their coach, but one team is going to definitely, be in the thick of things as far as the playoff hunt, and another team it's just going to be a disaster. I would guess, even I know you have so much respect for Sean McVay, and justifiably so, you probably would have said, well, yeah, the Chargers are finally going to break through, and it hasn't even been close to that.
Well, yeah, I am biased, and I will admit that, because I never would have anticipated the unmitigated disaster that the 2022 season was for the LA Rams, but also they had so many injuries. And at a certain point, when you have an offensive line that can't block anybody, and then you have a backup quarterback that also can't throw and, ends up throwing hospital balls and getting your best receiver hurt, that's a big problem. So that's part A. But part B, it's crazy how good we all feel Justin Herbert is as a quarterback, right? This is a guy that at this point should be getting into that elite tier. The Chargers paid him like an elite quarterback before the start of the season. They bring in Kellen Moore from Dallas, and he's supposed to be their offensive coordinator. And, during training camp, it's like, all right, yes, Herbert's going to be throwing balls, more past the line of scrimmage, unlike he did when Joe Lombardi was their offensive coordinator. And excuse me, Austin Eckler is not necessarily going to catch 100 passes because, excuse me, Justin Herbert's just throwing it behind the line of scrimmage. So all these things should have added up to a better season for the Chargers, right? We always talk about, oh my gosh, the Chargers have all this talent, but they can't put it together because, in part, I think some of it was Brandon Staley's hubris and a little bit of arrogance. We saw the press conference where he's telling people to stop asking who's going to call the defense and da-da-da-da-da, and we have complete confidence in our scheme and this and that. But when things aren't working and when things have not worked for a number of years, then this is the point you get to where it's like, man, why isn't it? And why aren't you making more changes? And so that absolute debacle that they had against the Las Vegas Raiders, where it's 63-21, and I think it was 63-7 at one point. That should never happen, whether or not Justin Herbert's playing, right? Especially because the Raiders scored 0 points 5 days before that. So that's why Brandon Staley had to go, and so did Tom Telesco, because at a certain point, you keep talking about talent and this and talent and that. Well, talent hadn't really won anything. So that's where it's going to be interesting to see who is this next coach of the Chargers going to be, who's the next GM going to be, and can they actually maximize the talent that they have? Because look, Patrick Mahomes is going to be Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs are going to be the class of that division probably for the next, let's call it 5 to 10 years, right? As long as they've got Mahomes in 15, they're going to have a great chance. But any team with a quarterback as talented as Justin Herbert should be right there in the mix too. So I'm interested to see who they end up hiring and if they are actually going to be able to get the best out of Justin Herbert.
Okay, so I'm going to throw some hypotheticals. We don't, I'm guessing that Belichick and New England are going to split. And Belichick's intriguing because, well, he's Bill Belichick. But, how long? He wants Shula's record. We know that. How long is he going to be? He's planning on, says he's not, leaving anytime soon. He's Belichick. Harbaugh also, I could see the Chargers saying, all right, here's $15 million a year, get us, if in fact the whole Michigan thing. Who do you think makes the most sense for the Chargers? And is there a name that's being bandied about there more than others?
I think if I were the Chargers, I would want Ben Johnson, the current offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. It's Belichick, to me, I can't see it. And if I'm an NFL owner, and I am not, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here doing this. I'd be throwing a drink on somebody, probably, at least if I were David Tepper.
We'll get to that.
But I don't think I would want a retread like Belichick. And it feels a little bit disrespectful to say, because this obviously is the greatest NFL head coach we've ever seen. But what has he done since 2018, right? Tom Brady dragged that team to the postseason in 2019 when they won the AFC East, and they then were in the wild card round and got bounced. Okay, that team was not very good. And then we see Tom Brady can still play. He goes down to Tampa Bay and immediately wins the Super Bowl. And then what happens? Oh, they do Cam Newton, and it's blah. That's a terrible season. They bring in Mac Jones. Things start to get a little bit better, but then Josh McDaniels goes away, and so they bring in this Frankenstein monster of Matt Patricia and Joe Judge to call the offense and design the offense, and then it's terrible. So it's and then this year's been awful too. So Belichick can still coach defense. There's no doubt about that. But based on what he's done in these last few years, I don't want that as my head coach. That's not what's next, right? And I think that if you're the Chargers, you want to be a little bit more forward thinking. And they were when they hired Brandon Staley. To their credit, they were trying to get the guy that was next. And Staley was coming off his one season with the Los Angeles Rams as defensive coordinator. They finished first in points allowed and first in yards allowed. That's great. But I think, especially right now, when you have a quarterback in Herbert where it's you need to maximize his talent. You don't want to bring in somebody that's maybe a Belichick, and then you say, all right, well, you're here for 2-3 years, and then what happens, right? Is you bringing Josh McDaniels with you, and then is he going to take over? And is he going to get to 3 out of the 4 teams in the AFC West? Like, is that really what you want to do if you're the Chargers? It's not what I would want to do. I don't know. I think Harbaugh would be a better option than Belichick, but I still would lean toward the hottest young offensive coordinator in the league right now, and that seems to be Ben Johnson.
You're voting for Rookie of the Year. It's down at, let's say, C.J. Stroud. Obviously, the position has to come into play, but you tweeted out Puka Nacua and 1,500 total yards, whatever it was in the list there. Who gets the nod there? Maybe it's not as much of a layup as we think.
It's tough because, the quarterback position is the most important position in sports, and it's one of the hardest positions to play. And CJ Stroud has played at an elite level. And if he wins this game on Saturday night and the Texans make it to the postseason, I cannot fault anybody for saying that CJ Stroud is Offensive Rookie of the Year. Frankly, if I had a vote, I might vote for CJ Stroud for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But I think Puka Nacua's case is as good as anybody's based on the things that he has done. And especially because he's a 5th-round pick out of BYU. I mean, nobody expected anything like this from him. And I was thinking about this the other day too, Chico. Remember, like, before the season, Kelly Stafford, Matthew Stafford's wife, put out this podcast, and she was talking about how difficult it was for Matthew to connect with the young players. And then what does he do but help Puka Nacua potentially become a record-breaking rookie wide receiver? So, I mean, it's just kind of crazy what he's done, and he has been an integral part of the Rams becoming a playoff team this year. So if anybody would vote for either one of those guys, whether it's Stroud or Nacua, I can't fault them, especially because when you're a rookie and you're helping a team make it to the postseason, that gives you that extra oomph in my mind. Like when Kyler Murray won it in 2019, I would have given it to A.J. Brown, because A.J. Brown was a huge part of the Tennessee Titans' success, and they ended up making it to the AFC Championship game. So that's just at least the way I see it.
Boy, it's crazy to think. You mentioned Nacua 5th round. Kyron Williams was what, 4th?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Last year. Yeah.
That's knocking it out.
Good drafting by Les Snead.
Yeah, not bad. Okay, before I let you go, and we appreciate the time as always. Again, Miles Simmons joining us from Pro Football Talk, Northeast Ohio native. So I caught some of Florio this morning.
Oh boy! And
he brought in an extra wide calculator with him because he wanted to figure out like what exactly is 300,000 or whatever it is to a $20 billion owner like David Tepper. And I think it came out to like if Miles, you were worth $1 million, and you might be. You've done very well, very talented. So if you're worth $1 million, he said essentially that'd be like fining you. I think he said like it was like $145 or something like that. Like not even just a bunch of zeros there. I get it. Okay. I understand because people always want to remind me like, hey, Roger Goodell, works for the owners, not the other way around. But can you just humor me a little bit? Like if that was a player, Miles, that would be without even blinking an eye, a multi-game suspension. These are your paying customers and you're acting like an 18-year-old, for God's sake.
I mean, I know 18-year-olds who wouldn't do that. I mean, look, it was ridiculous, and it gives credence to some of the things that folks have said about David Tepper, whether on the record or off the record. And, it's an embarrassment. It absolutely is. It's also an embarrassment that he didn't apologize for his behavior in that apology, which also did not appear anywhere on the Carolina Panthers website. I was informed of as I was looking through things this morning. So, look, I think that he should have been suspended for the season finale. And really, what kind of suspension is it if you don't have to watch that crap team that he put together play a game? But still, I don't think that any owner should be engaging in that kind of conduct. And I don't think that that's something that is up for debate or discussion. I mean, when have we ever heard of anything like this? This is ridiculous. So, yeah, it's embarrassing. Tepper has shown multiple times this year that he's not conducting himself in the way a typical NFL owner would, like shouting an expletive after, like right where the media is, outside the locker room, after the team loses in Tennessee, and then he fires Frank Reich the next day. And then he shows just this blatant disrespect for Frank Reich when he mispronounces Frank Reich's name at the press conference. Why would you do that? I don't understand it. I don't understand the approach. Tepper has obviously been very, very successful in business, but he's got to change a lot about the way he's handling himself and the Carolina Panthers in order for that team to be successful.
Yeah, if you want to humor me and everybody else, how about we just get rid of the are held to a, quote, higher standard, because we know that's complete BS, right?
Yeah. You're not wrong. You're not wrong about that.
Miles Simmons, again, with Pro Football Talk and the Peter King podcast. Man, it's so great to catch up with you. It's so great to see you having great success out there. And we knew it. We knew it here early on that you were going to be great. We appreciate the time. We hope to do it again here throughout the playoffs. And go Browns.
Absolutely, Chico. Take care.
All right. Again, Miles Simmons joining us on this Wednesday. Good stuff from him. Great stuff from him. And, that whole Tepper thing, I don't want to say I was shocked, but I was a little bit surprised that it wasn't like it's like they didn't even consider taking it seriously. A lot of times they'll humor you and, okay, we're gonna investigate this, or we got to talk. It was just like, all right, here's $300,000, which to him, zero, nothing. He doesn't care. And then they have the debacle with the, speaking of accountability, the Detroit-Dallas game. They send out a video of what it should happen, and it contradicts even what they're like, well, Taylor Decker needs to not only like show his jersey, do this, but also verbalize it. He didn't. Well, okay, the official then, you can explain that. Dan Skipper, they just assumed it was Dan Skipper, and the official, I love too afterwards how the official only has to answer to a one pool reporter. Like nobody else gets to question them. Great accountability, Raj. That's really well done. All right, Bohm, that's going to do it for today's edition. We had some good stuff with Eric Edholm and Miles Simmons. Thanks to both of those guys for joining us. You can find replays throughout the day, wherever you get your podcast, on Apple, on Spotify. Of course, we're available on Twitter at Chico Show CLE. Also available on Instagram with some great clips. It's going to be an interesting week. Again, I don't want to hear, and by the way, let me just say this in closing. If the Browns get absolutely just throttled, and they might, I don't want to hear anybody say, like, I don't know, that wasn't this is the decision they made. I'm totally fine with it. If they lose 48-zip, it's not going to change anything as we get ready for the postseason. Like, I thought Flacco might play a bit, but you know what? You want to rest him? Go ahead and rest him. We stand behind Jeff Driscoll. Damn it. So anyway, Bohm, great job as always. I am off tomorrow, back with you again on Friday, as we will have a great Friday send-off, hunting down James Rapine, as I'm sure it's been a rough year in Cincinnati. Browns will close it out, and then, of course, it's on to the postseason and all kinds of good stuff. Cavaliers in action tonight. Start of a back-to-back, I believe, against Washington. Haven't been great lately, but overall, sorry, you people are jumping the gun. We could be looking back on this as a blessing in disguise with the depth that's going to happen. Chico, you're really wearing the JB Kool-Aid glasses. Maybe I am, but I think it's going to be okay. At the very least, it's very premature to start trying to fire this guy right now. Anyway, we're out of time. We will be back with you on Friday. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody. See ya.